I was halfway through Mrs. Caldwell's weekly silver blue rinse when I noticed the storm clouds gathering outside my salon window. Same client, same conversation, same small-town bullshit. That's Stockton for you, where nothing changes except the weather. Gianna, honey, my nephew's still single. Mrs. Caldwell's eyes twinkled in the mirror as I worked the color through her thin hair. Such a nice boy. Works in insurance now. I forced a smile that didn't reach my eyes. That's nice, Mrs. C. 34 years old and still getting setups from clients who'd known me since I was cutting bangs on my Barbie dolls. I'd been running sheer perfection for almost a decade now, and sometimes it felt like I was stuck in some kind of time loop, seeing the same faces, having identical conversations. Monday was Mrs. Caldwell. Tuesday was Judge Peterson's mustache trim. The calendar of my life was scheduled around other people's hair. The bell above the door jingled as Mrs. Caldwell prattled on about her nephew's dental plan. I glanced up, expecting to see my 4 o'clock appointment, but instead, a gust of wind blew in a stranger. She was tall and slim, with rain-dampened blonde hair clinging to her neck. Something about her instantly made me stand straighter. Maybe it was the camera hanging around her neck, or her worn leather jacket that had clearly seen places beyond our town limits. Her blue eyes met mine briefly before darting away. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, her voice carrying a hint of somewhere else. "The sky just opened up. Mind if I wait it out?" Before I could answer, thunder cracked so loudly it made Mrs. Caldwell yelp under her processing cap. "Of course," I said, gesturing to the waiting area. "Make yourself comfortable." For the next 20 minutes, I tried not to stare at her while I finished Mrs. Caldwell's hair. The stranger thumbed through outdated magazines, occasionally glancing up to catch my eye in the mirror. Each time it happened, I felt a weird little ripple in my chest that I couldn't explain. By the time I walked Mrs. Caldwell to the door, the rain was coming down in sheets. "Looks like it's clearing up west of town," the stranger said, standing. "I should probably make a run for it." I looked at the downpour and back at her. "You'll be soaked in seconds." "Wouldn't be the first time." She smiled, and damn if it didn't light up her whole face. "Here," I said, reaching behind the receptionist desk for my umbrella. "Take this, you can bring it back, if you want." Our fingers brushed as she took it, and I swear something electric passed between us that had nothing to do with the storm outside. "I'm Bella," she said, holding my gaze a beat longer than necessary. "Gianna." I tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, suddenly conscious of how I must look after a full day of work. "Thanks for the umbrella, Gianna." The way she said my name made it sound different somehow. She stepped toward the door, pausing with her hand on the knob. "I'll definitely bring it back." After she left, I stood there watching her figure disappear into the gray curtain of rain, my hand still tingling where hers had touched. For the first time in ages, I found myself hoping someone would keep their promise to return. The call came at 5:30 a.m. Aunt Meredith had fallen again, and this time it was bad. 3 hours later, I was standing at the Stockton bus terminal, clutching a duffel bag and cursing my car for choosing this weekend to die. The mechanic had promised to look at it Monday, but that didn't help me now. "Ticket to Riverdale," I told the booth attendant, sliding over cash. "When's the next bus?" 10 minutes. "You're lucky, last seat." Lucky wasn't how I'd describe standing in the drizzling rain, waiting for a 4-hour bus ride along winding mountain roads. My stomach knotted at the thought. I'd inherited my mother's motion sickness, which made these trips my personal hell. The ancient bus wheezed to a stop, belching diesel fumes. I boarded last, scanning for the remaining seat, and froze halfway down the aisle. There, next to the window, was a familiar blonde head, my umbrella thief. Bella looked up, surprise lighting her blue eyes. "Gianna?" "Hey," I managed, suddenly aware of my rain-frizzed hair and the dark circles under my eyes. "Small world." "The smallest. Is this seat?" "Last one," I confirmed. She scooted toward the window. I lowered myself beside her, trying to maintain some personal space on the narrow seat, which proved impossible as the bus lurched forward. "Sorry," I mumbled, our shoulders bumping. "For what? Saving me with your umbrella the other day?" "I still have it, by the way. It's at my rental." "No, I meant, never mind." I gripped the armrest as we took the first curve. Long day ahead. "Where are you headed?" "Riverdale." My aunt fell and the bus swerved around a truck and my stomach rolled in protest. I closed my eyes, breathing deeply. "You okay?" "Motion sickness." I admitted. These mountain roads are my nemesis. The next curve had me gripping the seat in front of us. Without comment, Bella reached into her bag and pulled out a small travel pillow. Here, she said, voice soft. Put it behind your neck, and look at the horizon, not anything moving inside the bus. Her kindness caught me off guard. Thanks. I traveled through the Andes by bus once, she explained. Learned every motion sickness trick in existence. You've been to the Andes? I tried to focus on her words instead of my rebelling stomach. For the next hour, she told me about her travels, photographing landscapes across 3 continents, following seasonal work to fund her next journey. Her stories painted worlds so different from my small-town existence that I almost forgot my nausea. Almost. When we hit a particularly sharp turn, I groaned involuntarily. Without hesitation, Bella took my hand and pressed her thumb into a point on my wrist. Pressure point, she explained. Trust me. Her touch was cool and confident, her thumb making small circles. Whether it was the pressure point or the distraction of her skin against mine, something worked. I felt myself relax. Better? She asked. I nodded, suddenly aware of how close we were sitting. I could smell her shampoo, something citrusy and bright. So, I said, desperate to reclaim normal conversation. What brings you to this particular bus of misery? Photography assignment in Riverdale. Old barns and covered bridges. Sounds more pleasant than hospital rooms, I sighed. I'm sorry about your aunt, she said, still holding my wrist. Will you be staying overnight? Probably. You? Same. Our eyes met, and for a second, I forgot where we were. Then the bus driver announced a rest stop, breaking the moment. As passengers shuffled toward the front, Bella leaned over and did something unexpected. Her lips brushed my cheek so lightly I might have imagined it. For luck, she whispered. With your aunt. I touched my cheek as she moved past me into the aisle, wondering if everyone could see my pulse racing as clearly as I could feel it. I'd almost convinced myself the bus incident was a fluke, one of those strange connections that happen when you're trapped together in transit and then fade once real-life resumes. Aunt Meredith was fine, just a sprained wrist and wounded pride, and I'd returned to my regular schedule at the salon. No mysterious blonde travelers in sight. 2 days later, the bell above my door chimed while I was sweeping hair clippings. I believe this belongs to you. My umbrella dangled from Bella's fingertips, but she wasn't the same traveler from the bus. This Bella wore a sundress that floated around her knees, her blonde hair twisted up in a messy bun that somehow looked deliberate rather than haphazard. I was beginning to think you'd skip town with it, I said, taking the umbrella. Actually. She glanced around the empty salon. I'm sticking around for a while. Oh? I tried to sound merely curious rather than irrationally pleased. I rented the Miller cottage out by the lake. I'm working on a photography book, American Small Towns. Stockton has the perfect light. She tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. And I need a haircut. 10 minutes later, I had Bella draped in a black cape, her neck exposed as I ran my fingers through her damp hair. Professional touching, I'd done this thousands of times, but something about the way her shoulders relaxed under my hands felt different. Just a trim? I asked, our eyes meeting in the mirror. I trust you, she said simply. I worked in silence for a while, focusing on the snip of my scissors rather than the warmth radiating from her scalp. How's your aunt? She finally asked. Stubborn as ever, insisted on going home same day. I smiled, carefully cutting around her ear. Thanks for asking. And how about you? Recover from our bus adventure? Barely. I'm strictly a car girl. Speaking of which, mine's in the shop. Need a ride somewhere? She offered instantly. My rental came with a beat-up Jeep. You don't even know where I need to go. She laughed. I've got time and a full tank of gas. That covers most destinations in Stockton, I'd guess. There was something refreshing about her, the way she spoke without the layers of history and assumption that coated most conversations in a town where everyone had known me since birth. Actually, I said, moving to the other side of her head, I finish at 6 most days. No rush. I've got nowhere to be. I caught her eyes in the mirror again, and this time she held my gaze. Perfect, I said, my voice slightly huskier than intended. As I trimmed the last section, Bella told me about the cottage, how the pipes knocked all night, and the porch had the perfect view of sunrise over the lake. She spoke with her hands, animated in a way that made me have to work around her gestures. "Sorry," she laughed when I gently pushed her head back into position. "I get excited." "I can tell." I smiled, putting down my scissors. "All done." She examined her reflection, running fingers through the shortened layers. "It's perfect." "Professional opinion. You'd look good even with a terrible haircut." The words slipped out before I could censor them. Instead of getting weird, she just smiled wider. "Flattery costs extra, I assume?" After she paid, she lingered by the reception desk while I pretended to organize appointment cards. "There's this little coffee place by the lake," I said suddenly. "Kind of hidden. Tourists never find it." "Sounds like my kind of spot." "I could show you, after work, if you meant it about the ride." "I meant it," she said, backing toward the door with a smile that made my chest tight. 6 o'clock. The bell jingled as she left, and I realized I was still holding the appointment card I'd been fidgeting with. I'd written my personal number on the back without even thinking about it. I stared at the digits, wondering what the hell I was doing, and more importantly, why it felt so right. "The Harrington boy is back from college," Martha Sullivan announced as I shampooed her gray-streaked hair. Martha had been getting her roots touched up every 3 weeks for 20 years, and she used each appointment to download Stockton's gossip directly into my ear. "That's nice," I murmured, focusing on the water temperature. "Speaking of nice," her voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper, "I saw you and that blonde photographer at Lakeside Coffee 3 times this week." My hands stilled for a microsecond. In the 2 weeks since our first coffee date, Bella and I had fallen into an easy rhythm. After work, we'd explore some hidden corner of Stockton. Places I'd grown so accustomed to that I'd stopped seeing them until she pointed her camera and made them beautiful again. "She's new in town," I said neutrally, guiding Martha to the chair. "Just being friendly." Martha made a sound halfway between a laugh and a snort. "Friendly? Is that what they're calling it these days?" I busied myself with mixing her color. "Calling what?" "Don't play coy, Gianna Ward. This town's the size of a postage stamp. People notice things." "There's nothing to notice," I said, though the heat creeping up my neck suggested otherwise. "That's not what June Miller says. Claims she saw you two stargazing on her dock past midnight." Damn. June's property bordered the cottage Bella was renting. The night had been so perfect, warm with a slight breeze, the lake a black mirror reflecting a million stars. We'd been passing a bottle of wine back and forth, our fingers brushing with each exchange. Nothing had happened, but the possibility had hung between us, heavy as the summer air. "We're friends," I insisted, applying color with more focus than necessary. "And I'm Miss America." Martha eyed me in the mirror. "Just be careful, honey. People like her don't stay." I knew she meant well, in her small-town, boundary-free way. Still, her words stung because they echoed my own doubts. "All done," I said 40 minutes later, spinning her chair toward the mirror. "Same time in 3 weeks?" After Martha left, I texted Bella. "Apparently, we're the talk of the town." She replied immediately, "Good. I've always wanted to be notorious." That evening, dark clouds gathered as I cleaned up the salon. The weather report had mentioned possible thunderstorms, but in Stockton, summer storms were as common as church potlucks. I was just locking up when headlights cut through the gloom, and Bella's Jeep pulled into the parking lot. She rolled down the window, rain already spotting her windshield. "Need a ride? Looks like it's about to pour." I had barely closed the passenger door when the skies opened. Through the downpour, she drove us to my small house on the edge of town. Lightning flashed as we ran to my porch, laughing and soaked despite the short distance. "Come in and dry off," I offered, fumbling with my keys as thunder rattled the windows. Inside, I handed her a towel. She rubbed it through her hair, leaving it charmingly disheveled. "I should probably wait out the worst of this," she said, glancing out at the storm. I was about to agree when my phone buzzed with a weather alert. Severe thunderstorm warning, flash flood advisory for low-lying areas. "The cottage," I realized aloud. "It's right by the lake." Bella checked her phone and swore. "Roads already flooded between here and there." "You'll stay here," I said, the decision made before I'd fully thought it through. I've got a couch. You sure? She stood close enough that I could smell her rain-damp skin. Absolutely not, I said honestly, and we both laughed, breaking some of the tension. The power flickered once, twice, then went out completely. In the sudden darkness, I felt rather than saw her move closer. Got any candles? She asked, her voice low. I did. We lit them, their warm glow turning my modest living room into something intimate and vaguely unreal. We drank wine on the couch while the storm raged, and somewhere between the second glass and a particularly loud crash of thunder, Bella's hand found mine in the darkness. I'm glad I got stuck here, she whispered. When I kissed her, she tasted like rain and possibility, and I stopped caring what Martha Sullivan or anyone else in this town might think. Morning sunlight streamed through my living room curtains, hitting me square in the face. I blinked awake, momentarily confused by the weight across my midsection until I remembered Bella, the storm. Everything that followed. She was still sleeping, her blonde hair splayed across my chest, one arm draped over me possessively. I studied her face, unguarded in sleep, trying to process what had happened between us. Part of me wanted to panic, to overthink what this meant for my carefully ordered life. But a larger part just wanted to stay in this moment, listening to her breathe. When her eyes finally fluttered open, there was an instant of confusion, followed by a slow, lazy smile. Morning, she murmured. Morning. I hesitated. Do you want coffee? Coffee would be great. In the kitchen, I moved on autopilot, measuring grounds and filling the reservoir while mentally drafting and discarding a dozen ways to navigate this new territory. When I returned with 2 mugs, Bella was sitting up, her hair tousled in a way that made my stomach flip. So, she said, accepting the coffee. That happened. It did. I sat beside her, careful to leave space between us. Let's not label it right away. She blew across her mug. Last night was perfect. I don't want to complicate it. Right. Absolutely. I nodded too enthusiastically, relieved and disappointed in equal measure. We sipped our coffee in silence that stretched just past comfortable. Eventually, Bella checked her phone. The road to the cottage should be clear now, she said. I should probably go change. Of course. I walked her to the door. See you later? Definitely. She hesitated, then leaned in to kiss me lightly. Tonight, I could make dinner. After she left, I spent the day in a daze, going through the motions at work while my mind replayed fragments of the night before. By closing time, I'd convinced myself both that it was the beginning of something significant and that Bella was already regretting everything. The cottage was lit with string lights when I arrived, giving it a magical quality against the deepening twilight. Bella opened the door before I could knock, looking nervously excited. I hope you like pasta, she said, ushering me inside. It's basically the only thing I can cook without burning. I love pasta. The cottage smelled of garlic and herbs. While Bella finished cooking, I wandered into the living room, taking in the temporary home she'd created. Camera equipment was organized neatly on a desk. Prints were pinned to a corkboard. Landscapes, architectural details, a few portraits of strangers. She'd captured Stockton in ways I'd never seen it, making the familiar seem exotic and beautiful. Need any help? I called. Actually, could you grab my backup drive? It's in that box by the couch. I want to show you some photos after dinner. The box was overflowing with equipment, cables, lens filters, memory cards, and underneath it all, a worn shoebox. As I moved it aside, the lid slipped off, spilling vintage photographs across the floor. Shoot, sorry, I said, scrambling to gather them. I paused at one, an old Polaroid of a state fair. The colors faded to sepia tones. Something about it tugged at my memory. I picked it up, studying the details, a Ferris wheel, cotton candy stands, and in the foreground, a little girl with dark pigtails holding a giant stuffed panda. The girl was turned slightly away, but I recognized the birthmark on her arm. Bella? My voice sounded strange. Why do you have a picture of me as a kid? She appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a dish towel. What? I held up the photo. This is me, at the Millersville State Fair. I was 8. She took the picture, her expression shifting from confusion to shock. That's impossible. The birthmark doesn't lie. I pointed to my left arm, where the same strawberry mark still resided. Why do you have this? I don't. She stopped, staring at the photo. I took this. It was one of my first rolls of film. My mom got me a camera for my birthday and we went to that fair. She looked up, her blue eyes wide. Gianna, I think we've met before. That's not possible, I whispered. But even as I said it, memories stirred. A teenage girl with a camera asking if she could photograph my prize. Me, shy but proud, posing with the panda I'd won at the ring toss. 15 years ago, Bella said softly. I was 14 with my first camera. I took the photo back, staring at the captured moment. Two strangers whose paths had crossed and then diverged, only to reconnect in ways neither could have imagined. You kept this? All these years? She nodded. It was one of my favorite shots. I never knew who you were. And now? I asked, my heart hammering. Now I do, she said simply, taking my hand. I remember the panda, I said, sitting cross-legged on Bella's floor with the photograph between us. Dinner forgotten, we'd spent the last hour excavating the buried connection neither of us had recognized. My dad spent like $30 on that ring toss before I finally won it. I named him Fernando. Fernando the panda? Bella laughed. Creative. I was 8, I protested, but I was smiling too. I slept with that thing until high school. What happened to him? Storage box in my attic probably. I should check. I tapped the photograph. But you were taking pictures even then? Bella nodded, pulling more photos from the shoebox. My mom's idea. I was this awkward teenager who didn't fit in anywhere. She thought giving me a camera might help me see the world differently. Her voice softened. She was right. You clearly had talent, I said, examining another shot. This one of an elderly couple sharing an ice cream cone. Even as a beginner, she'd captured something intimate and real. I was just clicking the shutter. But something about that day. I remember seeing you win that panda. You looked so triumphant. She reached out, her fingers tracing the outline of my childhood self. I asked if I could take your picture because you were exactly what I wanted to capture, pure joy. The knowledge that we'd intersected before sent a strange thrill through me. Had some cosmic force pulled us back together? Or was it just coincidence, the random chaos of life occasionally creating patterns that seemed meaningful? It's weird, I said. I grew up an hour from here. You grew up, where again? Chicago suburbs. Right, different worlds. And yet somehow we both ended up here. Maybe not that surprising, Bella said. I do photograph small towns for a living, and you never left yours. Harsh, I laughed, but she wasn't entirely wrong. I'd never ventured far from Stockton, even for college. I didn't mean it badly, she said, taking my hand. Some people find where they belong and stay. I've always been the opposite, restless, moving on before I get too comfortable. Her words carried a subtle warning that I tried to ignore. Instead, I focused on another photo, this one of the fair's Ferris wheel at sunset, the carriages silhouetted against an orange sky. I have the strangest memory of that Ferris wheel, I said slowly. I was terrified of heights, but my cousin dared me to ride it. At the top, I kept my eyes shut tight until some girl in the carriage said, "You're missing everything beautiful." I opened my eyes and saw the sunset. Bella stared at me, her face pale. That was me. What? No way. It was. I remember that. I said that exact thing to a girl who looked like she was having a panic attack. We stared at each other, the coincidence almost too perfect to believe. Then Bella started laughing, and I couldn't help joining her. This is ridiculous, she said between giggles. Next you'll tell me I delivered your pizza in college or something. God, I hope not. I was a terrible tipper in college. Our laughter faded into something softer, more serious. Bella tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, her touch lingering on my cheek. Do you believe in fate, Gianna? I don't know, I answered honestly, but this is definitely making me reconsider. Outside, the moon had risen over the lake, casting a silver path across the water. Bella stood, pulling me to my feet. Come on. She led me down to the small pier that extended from the cottage property. The night was clear and warm, crickets chirping in rhythm with the gentle lapping of water against the pilings. I've photographed hundreds of small towns, Bella said, facing me at the pier's edge. But I've never felt connected to one like this. And it's not really about Stockton. No? It's you. Her confession hung in the night air. I finally figured out what I was looking for in all those places. When she kissed me, it wasn't the urgent heat of the previous night. This was slower, deliberate, like she was memorizing the moment. I tasted the certainty in her lips, felt the question in her hands as they framed my face. After we broke apart, she said, "I'm not good at staying in one place, Gianna, but I'm starting to think I could be." I didn't trust myself to speak, so I just kissed her again, the night water reflecting our joined silhouette like another photograph. One more moment captured between two people whose paths seemed destined to cross. "Gianna, did you hear what I said?" Mrs. Peterson stared at me from beneath her foil highlights, her eyebrows raised expectantly. "Sorry," I mumbled, refocusing on her hair. "Could you repeat that?" "I said my daughter's wedding planner just canceled. Do you know anyone who could step in? The wedding's in 6 weeks." For the third time that morning, my mind had drifted to Bella. We'd been practically inseparable for the past 3 weeks, and Stockton had noticed. Some, like my assistant Tori, were supportive. Others. "Gianna?" Mrs. Peterson prompted. "Maybe try Helen at the flower shop? She did my cousin's wedding last year." Mrs. Peterson nodded, then lowered her voice. "I heard Sharon Miller canceled her standing appointment. Something about new values not aligning with hers anymore?" My stomach tightened. Sharon Miller had been coming to me for a decade, through 3 children, a divorce, and countless hairstyles. She was also the treasurer at Stockton's largest church, and apparently had seen Bella and me holding hands at the farmer's market on Sunday. "Her choice," I said lightly, though the loss stung both professionally and personally. "It's that photographer, isn't it? The blonde?" Mrs. Peterson wasn't being unkind, just Stockton direct. "People are talking. People always talk." I concentrated on sectioning her hair, hoping my face didn't betray my feelings. "Well, I think it's nice you found someone. Lord knows you've been alone long enough." I smiled gratefully. "Thanks, Mrs. P." When the salon finally emptied that evening, I locked the door with a sigh of relief. My phone buzzed with a text from Bella. "Come over when you're done? Big news." 20 minutes later, I was knocking on her cottage door. She opened it with a broad smile and pulled me into a kiss that made me forget all about Sharon Miller and small-town judgments. "Guess what?" she asked, practically bouncing with excitement. "You found gold buried under the cottage?" "Better." She led me to her desk where her laptop displayed an email. "My publisher loves the Stockton photos. They want to expand the project into a full feature." "Bella, that's amazing!" I hugged her, genuinely thrilled. I knew they would. "Your photos make this place look like somewhere people would actually want to visit." Her smile faltered slightly. "There's more. They've offered me an advance on a follow-up book, East Coast Harbor Towns." The implication sank in slowly. "You'd be leaving." "In about 3 weeks." She took my hands. "The timing is perfect. I'll catch the fall colors in New England." 3 weeks, I repeated numbly. "I know it's sudden, but this is a huge opportunity, and the publisher never moves this fast unless—" "No, I get it." I forced enthusiasm into my voice. "It's an incredible offer. You have to take it." "I want you to be happy for me," she said, searching my face. "I am." We both knew I was lying, but neither acknowledged it. Instead, we opened a bottle of wine and toasted her success, talking about everything except what would happen when she left. Later that night, lying beside her in bed, I asked the question that had been gnawing at me. "Do you do this in every town? Find someone, get close, then leave." Bella propped herself up on one elbow. "That's not fair." "Isn't it? You said yourself you don't stay in one place long." "That doesn't mean I make a habit of breaking hearts wherever I go." She sounded hurt. "What we have, it's different." "How am I supposed to believe that?" She was quiet for so long I thought she might not answer. "You're not the only one scared, Gianna. You think it's easy for me to leave now?" A raindrop hit the window, then another. Within seconds, a summer storm was beating against the glass, mirroring the tumult inside me. "I've spent my whole life in this town," I said finally. "Everyone knows me. My business is here. I can't just—" "I'm not asking you to leave," Bella interrupted. "I just need you to understand that this is who I am. I follow the work. And people like me get left behind." I sat up, suddenly needing space. "It's fine. I knew what this was. Did you? She reached for my hand in the dark, because I'm still figuring it out myself. Outside, lightning flashed, briefly illuminating her face, uncertain, vulnerable in a way I hadn't seen before. I think I'm falling in love with you, she whispered, and it terrifies me. The rain intensified, drumming against the roof like a heartbeat. I leaned in and kissed her, tasting the salt of tears, mine or hers, I couldn't tell. Me too, I admitted. Both parts. You'll call when you get to New York? I asked, watching Bella stack prints into a portfolio case. Her cottage had transformed from cozy hideaway to staging area, half-packed boxes creating an obstacle course between rooms. Of course. She didn't look up, too focused on organizing her work. The gallery wants everything ready for a meeting on Friday. The email from her publisher had arrived 3 days ago, sudden interest from a prestigious New York gallery that wanted to feature her small-town America collection. They needed her there immediately to discuss exhibition possibilities. An opportunity too good to pass up, we both agreed, at least out loud. I can't believe how fast they're moving, I said, handing her a roll of bubble wrap. That's the industry. Everything's dead silent for months, then suddenly everyone's desperate. She finally met my eyes. I'm sorry about the timing. We'd settled into an unspoken agreement not to discuss what would happen after she left. 3 blissful, complicated weeks of pretending the clock wasn't ticking. Now only 2 days remained. It's fine, I said automatically. Your career is important. So is this. She gestured between us. I meant what I said, Gianna. We'll figure it out. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Long-distance relationships had never appealed to me, all the longing with none of the comfort. But the alternative was worse. As I helped her pack, I found a small leather-bound journal tucked between photography books. What's this? I asked, flipping it open before she could respond. Inside were notes, fragments of conversations, sketches of places, and names. Pages of names, dates, locations. I froze when I recognized a pattern, names followed by heart symbols, crossed out one after another. Bella, I said slowly, what am I looking at? She snatched the journal from my hands. It's private. Are those people you've been with, in different towns? Her hesitation was answer enough. I felt something cold settle in my chest. So I'm just another name to cross out? Part of your collection? It's not like that, she said, her voice tight. That journal is old, from before. Before what? Before me? Because it looks pretty well used. I hated how shrill I sounded, but couldn't stop. Is this what you do? Sweep into town, find someone local, have your fun, then disappear? Her face hardened. You're determined to make me the villain, aren't you? I'm trying to understand what's real and what's just. I don't know, your SS Small Town Experience package? That's unfair, and you know it. We stood among her half-packed life, the distance between us suddenly vast. I think I need some air, I said finally, grabbing my keys. Outside, twilight was settling over the lake. I drove aimlessly, eventually pulling into the overlook where we'd watched meteor showers just last week. The same stars were emerging now, indifferent to human drama below. My phone buzzed with texts from Bella, but I couldn't bring myself to read them. Instead, I called Tori. I need a sanity check, I said when she answered. Am I an idiot for falling for someone who's literally known for not staying put? Tori sighed. You're not an idiot, you're just human. She has a whole journal, Tori. Names with little hearts, all crossed out. Have you asked her about it? I didn't give her a chance to explain, I admitted. I just left. Maybe hear her out before you write the ending. By the time I returned to the cottage, it was after midnight. Bella sat on the porch steps, her face shadowed in moonlight. I thought you weren't coming back, she said quietly. I almost didn't. She held out the journal. If you want to know the truth, read the last pages. I hesitated, then opened it. The most recent entry was dated 2 weeks ago. I looked up, words failing me. I've never felt this way, she whispered. I don't know what to do with it. Neither do I. I sat beside her on the steps. We're quite a pair. I have to go to New York, she said, taking my hand. But I don't have to stay forever. Dawn was breaking when we finally went inside. No resolution reached, but something fragile and hopeful hanging between us. 2 weeks. 14 days of checking my phone for messages that grew increasingly sporadic. Bella had left for New York with promises of calls, texts, and a swift return once her gallery meeting concluded. But one meeting became many, and a few days stretched into a fortnight of silence, broken only by brief apologetic texts. "She'll call," Tori insisted, watching me check my phone for the third time in an hour as we closed the salon. "Sure," I agreed, not believing it myself anymore. I'd thrown myself into work, taking extra appointments and staying late to reorganize product shelves that didn't need reorganizing. Anything to avoid the emptiness of my house, or worse, driving by the now vacant cottage where phantom memories lurked behind every window. "You know," Tori said, sweeping hair clippings, "Mrs. Benton is getting married, needs her whole bridal party styled." "That's great," I said absently, wiping down mirrors. "It's 8 people, on a Saturday. We'd have to open early." "Fine by me. Not like I have weekend plans anymore." Tori leaned on her broom, studying me. "This isn't healthy, Gianna." "I'm fine. You check your phone every 5 minutes. You haven't smiled in days. And yesterday you gave Mr. Wilson the same haircut twice in a row." I winced. "He noticed?" "He's bald on top. Hard not to notice when you keep trimming the sides." We finished closing in silence. Outside, autumn had arrived while I wasn't paying attention, painting Stockton in russet and gold, the same colors Bella had left to capture in New England harbor towns. At home, I wandered restlessly through rooms that felt too quiet. On impulse, I climbed to the attic and dug through storage boxes until I found it. Fernando the panda, dusty but intact. I hugged the stuffed animal to my chest, remembering the young girl who'd won it and the teenager who'd photographed her triumph. "This is pathetic," I told the panda, but I took him downstairs anyway. My doorbell rang the next morning as I was getting ready for work. A courier stood on my porch holding a thick manila envelope. "Delivery for Gianna Ward," he said. "Signature required." Inside the envelope was a smaller one containing a plane ticket to New York City and a handwritten note on gallery stationery, Friday, 7 p.m. "Be there, please." No signature, but I knew the handwriting. I called Tori immediately. "I need Friday off." "What happened?" she asked, instantly alert. "I'm going to New York." About damn time. I spent the flight alternating between excitement and dread, rehearsing what I'd say to Bella when I saw her. The address on the gallery invitation led me to a renovated industrial space in Chelsea, its windows glowing with warm light against the evening sky. Inside, well-dressed patrons milled around photographs, Bella's photographs. I recognized Stockton's landmarks transformed through her lens. The old covered bridge at sunrise, Main Street during the summer festival, the lake in various moods. Then I saw them, a separate wall dedicated to portraits. Me, captured in moments I hadn't realized were being preserved, laughing in my salon, concentration on my face as I cut hair, asleep on Bella's couch, silhouetted against the pier at sunset. "You came." I turned to find Bella watching me nervously, more elegant than I'd ever seen her in a black dress. Her blonde hair swept up. "You sent a plane ticket. Hard to ignore." I tried calling, so many times, but I kept thinking about what I'd say and nothing seemed right, and... Bella. I cut her off. "What is all this?" She gestured to the exhibition. My editor called it intersections, moments where paths cross and recross. "That's not what I meant." "I know." She took a deep breath. "I fell in love with you, Gianna. That wasn't in my plan." "And now?" "Now I have this offer. A permanent position with the gallery, documenting American life." She hesitated. "But I told them I need a home base, a place to return to between assignments." My heart stuttered. And where would that be? I was thinking somewhere small, with a lake, and a very talented hairdresser. I looked again at the portraits, not just snapshots, but a chronology. Us as children at the fair, though I hadn't known it then. And at the end of the wall, a photograph I'd never seen, the two of us reflected in the salon mirror, looking at each other with everything written plainly on our faces. Beside it hung a small note. "Will you be my intersection, forever?" When I kissed her, the gallery crowd applauded, but I barely heard them. After all our crossed paths, we'd finally found our way to the same destination.